Hey guys, welcome back. Hi, how are you? I'm doing well. Today I'm going to be talking about the manga Uzumaki written by Junji Ito. You know, the horror manga master Junji Ito. Yeah, that guy. Well, anyways, for anyone that hasn't read or heard about Uzumaki, it's about a small town that is cursed by what the characters in the manga refer to as the spiral. And this isn't some name for a monster or some serial killer trying to hunt you down. This is literally like the pattern that we see every single day. I know this doesn't sound scary in any way, but Junji Ito has done so to make the spiral pattern be haunting, evil, addicting, and murderous to the people in the town, and we find out how it has these different effects as the manga goes on. And this manga is definitely a recommendation to most horror and gore fans out there. This will hit the spot. And from this point on in the video, I'm going to be talking about some spoilers in the manga. Um, so if you want to read it, or if you're interested in reading it, definitely click off this video, pick it up, reading online. I definitely recommend reading this manga. So do that. And I won't be talking about like every single detail in the manga as well. So if I miss anything, don't get mad at me. But I mean, if you read it, you should know every detail. And if you care that much about the details, read it. I want to start off by saying that the artwork done by Junji Ito is absolutely stunning. It's something that definitely pulls you in immediately, even in panels that are supposed to be grotesque and vile, that make you want to look away. You can't stop but admire the hard work that is put into every inch of the panel. And when it comes to the gory panels, it definitely has the right effect on the reader, because there's definitely a few that are still stuck in my head and I haven't been able to get out. Like, I read this manga probably a few weeks ago to almost a month, and there are a few that are still in there. For anyone that has read the manga, I will say that the few panels that are still in here involve snails and a pregnant woman. So if you read the manga, you know exactly what that means. I mean, I should also say, like, re-pregnant, if that's a word. Again, if you know what panel I'm talking about, you can kind of get where I'm coming from on that one. I don't want to describe it in like grave detail because it's going to gross me out a little bit. And I mean, that's just another point of like how effective this one image has been. And the characters we mainly focus on are Kairi and her family and her brother Shuichi, as like Kairi and her boyfriend are mainly the two that interact with all of the curses and so on in the town. So they're the main two that we follow throughout the story. And I personally like Shuichi, mainly because he's the main one to talk about the curse first. He's the one that brings it up in all the cases, and he's the first person that we see mention the curse of the spiral, and that infects the whole town. And he's also the first to be seriously affected with it, because his parents were two of the like first victims of the curse. I shouldn't say he was like the first one affected, because his dad was like the first big one that got affected, but died, and that affected Shuichi. And then the mom died, which also affected Shuichi. But he also is like, he protects and does everything he can to protect Kairi, even though he's like slowly becoming affected with the spiral. He like fights these urges to help her in any way possible. I did get annoyed by how long it took Kairi to really understand the curse or start like accepting it. Like, I get it to a point, but when you start like seeing it 2-3 times, or even when you're affected by the curse to where like you have this hair growing competition with your classmate that eventually kills your classmate, you would think that whenever you see something out of the ordinary that you immediately be like, the curse. The main thing I want to like talk about is the story, of course, mainly because it doesn't really spell it out as you read it. I honestly can't even be like, this is what it's supposed to be about. But I mean, I'll do my best to to explain what I read in put it into words and hope that I am not 100% like wrong. So I'll just summarize it and add the little bit of notes in my head that I have that I've been thinking about for like the past month. To me, every chapter, at least the first half, felt like an episode of The Twilight Zone or like some Monster of the Week show, where every episode had its like victim and how the curse affected them and it would eventually, kill them. And it honestly felt like our two main characters were just kind of like bystanders in all of it. Like they would try to help whoever was infected, but in the long run, their fate was sealed and would overall be taken by the curse, whereas like being killed and all that whatnot. I would say like the first half was pretty much this, but the second half is where things started to pick up and escalate, and everything was coming to an end for this poor little town. And I really enjoyed how fast it went in the end, because in like the first half reading it, I was just curious of like what is all the backstory, like what's going to happen, what's the end going to be like. But then there comes a point where it just happens and you can't stop reading because you're so curious as to what all of this has been leading up to. But yeah, there's a point where just everything happens, from twisters, from everyone being locked into these low-income shacks, to man-made twisters, to what we should just call cannibalism at this point. Like, what is happening? The main thing that made my jaw drop pretty much is like, so these people are stuck in these shacks, and then so much so that they start getting clumped together, and then they start fusing these shacks together to make more room. But because they're so clumped together, they start forming this like human blob thing, and they push our two characters and a group of people out, and then they try to go find a way out of the town. Long story short, they don't, because I mean, it's become obvious at this point you just can't leave. And this thing happens with their brother. He might still be alive as like the snail person, who knows. But anyways, Shuichi and Kairi come back, and then they see all the shacks connected in the form of a spiral. Pretty wild. What's wilder than that is you can hear this village blob inside of village spiral, and then all of a sudden they are just flushed, question mark. So you just hear like pretty much a choo-choo train, but I just want to call it flushing of the village blob down into the pond that has pretty much been this source of evil throughout the entire book. But flushed, and the whole time Kairi is worried about her parents, because they were going to eventually become part of Shack Blob. So she wants to go save them, ultimately follows this spiral down underground, where we find this ruin being made from the people, and then ultimately Shuichi and Kairi can't escape. They're hurt because they fell down into this thing, so they eventually form into this ruin, and now we wait for this pattern to restart later, and it's just wild. It's so wild. Like, in the early part of the manga, they pretty much say that the pattern pretty much makes our brain look at like the outside, and then we slowly follow the pattern to the center. And I'm pretty sure that's just all in all what this was supposed to be about. These characters try to leave, but they were stuck, and then ultimately went down to the center and that's just what's it's just bound by destiny at this point that this town cannot leave this spiral. It's made for the spiral. It's wild. I recommend pretty much anyone that's a horror fan, weird fan, because it's weird. I recommend anyone reading it. I enjoyed it. There were some parts that I loved, some parts that I was disgusted by, some parts that haunt me. I mean, there was even some parts I didn't like. I wasn't a huge fan of the man-made twisters, but I mean, all in all, it was a way to keep the people inside. So like every part of the manga was for something and was like new. There wasn't like a constant redoing of something. Even like the snail parts, you could argue they did that twice, but I mean they did it in different ways because like the people transformed into the snails in the early part, but in the second part when they were doing it, it was to feed the cannibalism of these crazy fucking people. So yeah, I recommend it. Read it. I have purchased more of his works. I am just trying to build the courage to read more of his works. So yeah, it's definitely in my top manga now. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and see ya.